if you spend, even just 5 minutes on the internet today looking at how different generations talk to each other, you are going to see a very specific narrative.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. You see older women being just relentlessly attacked by younger generations. They're accused of, well, upholding these traditional patriarchal family structures.
Yeah, you see them tagged with insults like "pick me," which is just wild to see directed at women in their 60s and 70s.
Exactly. They are routinely accused of enabling the patriarchy or, blame for raising submissive daughters or entitled sons.
Right. The criticism is that they're defending the very institutions that constrained them in the first place.
Yes, but, and this is why we're here today, the data tells a completely different story, like almost an unbelievable story.
It really does. It's a complete contradiction.
Because right as this cultural criticism is hitting this fever pitch online, the statistics show us that these exact same women are the ones burning the traditional family structure to the ground.
It is a stunning divergence. I mean, between the cultural narrative we see on social media and the actual boots-on-the-ground statistical reality, it's like two different worlds.
It really is.
Researchers actually call this the gray divorce revolution. And it forces a complete reexamination of our fundamental assumptions.
Some of our assumptions.
Yeah, not just our assumptions about these specific women, but, how we view duty, the invisible labor that sustains a household, and what it actually looks like to dismantle a long-standing structure from the inside out.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this gray divorce revolution. We really want to pull back the curtain on the hidden realities of these decades-long marriages.
And we have an incredibly insightful piece of source material today to help us do that.
We do. It's an article by Modupe Ayobami for the Good Men Project, and it asks this really defining question, which is simply, why now?
Right. Why are women waiting until their 50s or 60s or even their 70s to initiate this massive demographic earthquake?
Okay, let's unpack this because the statistics from the article, they're just staggering. I mean, currently 1 in 3 divorces in the United States involves individuals over the age of 50.
1 in 3. And to really understand the gravity of that, we have to look backward for a second.
Okay, let's look at the historical context.
So in 1990, that over 50 demographic, they accounted for merely 8.7% of all divorces.
Wait, less than 9%?
Less than 9%.
And now it's over 33%. That is a massive jump.
It is. The text shows that the share surged to 36% by 2019.
Wow.
The divorce rate for couples over 50 has literally doubled in 3 decades.
Doubled.
And for couples over 65, it has tripled.
That is just, the women who are so culturally conditioned to stay forever, they're the ones packing their bags.
Yeah, and a tripling of a divorce rate in a single generation, that's not just a statistical anomaly. It's not some minor social trend.
No, it's a massive shift.
It is a fundamental restructuring of society's oldest continuous unit. When you see retirement age individuals ending their marriages at 3 times the historical rate, you are looking at a profound redefinition of the golden years.
Right. It shifts from this time of, quiet settling down to a time of radical and honestly often very disruptive restructuring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, numbers, as massive as they are, they can be completely sterile.
They can. They give us the what, but they offer absolutely zero insight into the how or the deeply human why.
Right.
And the source material today anchors this data with a specific, really gut-wrenching story that I think we need to spend some time on.
Yeah, the author introduces this woman who reached out to an online relationship advice page.
And her question was so simple.
Simple, but loaded with a lifetime of context. She just asked, am I selfish?
Am I selfish? Wow. And she'd been married for over 25 years. And according to the text, those weren't just, years of mild incompatibility.
No, definitely not.
She survived active emotional abuse, manipulation, gaslighting, all of it.
And now her children are fully grown. They are out of the house.
The emptiness.
Right. And her husband has aged. He is frailer. He's dependent. And he fundamentally lacks that physical intimidation that he once wielded over her.
And it's at this precise moment that she decides, I am leaving.
Yes. But the reaction she gets from her adult children is incredibly revealing.
Because they aren't relieved for her, are they?
Not at all. They are furious.
Furious. The article notes that they came to her armed with one agonizing question, which was, Why now?
Right. They demand to know why she would abandon their father when he's frail and when he needs a caretaker.
They literally ask why, after all these years of chaos, why would she leave just when the house is finally empty and they could ostensibly enjoy some, peace and quiet together?
It highlights a massive disconnect. I mean, the children are looking purely at the present conditions, completely isolated from a quarter century of history.
They just see an aging man who needs help.
Exactly. They see an aging man requiring assistance and a mother who is seemingly just walking away from an established duty.
If I'm looking at this from the kid's perspective, I have to be honest, it feels counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, think about a family surviving a terrible storm in a bunker together.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You endure all the rough years, the rationing, the fear, just huddled in this bunker. And the second the storm finally passes, the moment the sun comes out and it's supposedly safe to just exist, someone decides to blow up the bunker from the inside.
Right.
From the outside, that looks like absolute madness. You survived the worst of it, so why leave during the calm?
What's fascinating here is how that bunker metaphor perfectly exposes the flaw in the children's logic.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Because for the mother, the storm hasn't passed at all. The weather didn't change, the power dynamic shifted.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What the children are perceiving as peace, or, the sun coming out, is actually just the father's physical and energetic decline.
So the storm is still there.
The toxicity, the historical wreckage, the psychological manipulation, all of that is still trapped inside the bunker with her.
It didn't magically go away just because he got older.
Exactly. The only difference is that the person generating the storm is no longer robust enough to enforce her captivity.
That completely flips the perspective. I mean, the peace the kids are observing is just his inability to be as destructive as he used to be.
Yes.
It's not a resolution of the conflict at all. It's just sheer exhaustion.
And that fundamental misunderstanding highlights a severe empathy deficit.
An empathy deficit. Yeah, the source talks a lot about that.
The children are mourning the present-day fracture of their family unit, but they are entirely blind to the conditions their mother had to endure to keep that unit intact for them in the first place.
That empathy deficit is a massive through line in the author's work here. There's a striking observation in the text where the author points out that when an older woman files for divorce, societal concern erupts immediately.
Almost instantly.
But almost never for her.
Never for her. The societal gaze completely bypasses the initiator.
It's wild. Where does the focus go?
The focus instantly locks onto the husband. How will he cope with the isolation? Who is going to make his meals?
Right. And then it moves to the adult children.
Exactly. How will this disrupt their holiday traditions? Where will everyone go for Thanksgiving?
It becomes this logistical and moral panic about the family structure, and specifically about the husband's quality of life in his final years. I find that maddening, to be honest. Society is so eager to assess what she owes this man, rushing to judge her character for leaving an ailing spouse, while completely ignoring the missing questions.
Because no one is asking what the last 25 years actually look like from the inside.
No one.
No one is inquiring about the specific toll it took on her nervous system to make it to this point, or what core piece of her humanity she's trying to salvage by finally walking out that door.
Think about a time in your own life, and I mean you, listening right now, think about a time when everyone expected you to manage a crisis.
We've all been there to some degree.
Right. You carried the weight, you did the invisible labor, you absorbed all the stress so everyone else could just function normally. And the absolute second you set a firm boundary and stepped back, you became the villain.
Because you stopped making it easy for them.
Exactly. The ongoing crisis wasn't the problem anymore. Your refusal to quietly manage it was suddenly the problem.
And the psychological toll of that specific dynamic, magnified over decades, is devastating.
You can't even imagine.
The complete absence of curiosity from her ecosystem, her family, her friends, her community, it actually serves to validate her decision to leave.
Because it proves her point.
Right. When she sees that they aren't asking, how did you survive, but rather, how could you leave him, she runs into a really harsh realization.
Which is what?
That it has always been everyone else first. Her safety and happiness were always secondary to the maintenance of the family image.
Wow.
And at 55 or 60 or 65, she realizes the line never moves. She is simply done being last.
Done being last. That is so powerful. But to really grasp why she stayed so long, we have to look backward.
Yeah.
We can't just marvel at the exit. We have to examine the architecture of the entrapment.
Absolutely. The author breaks down the invisible forces that kept these women locked in, and it forces us to look at the historical realities of these specific marriages.
It really requires stepping back into the cultural environment of the 1970s, the 80s, and the early 90s.
And the first major force the text identifies is the immense shield of the two-parent home.
Yeah, we tend to forget how heavy the stigma of a broken home used to be.
It was huge.
It wasn't just, a logistical headache of having two addresses or figuring out weekend visitation. It was a character judgment on the entire family.
A mother in that era made a highly deliberate, really calculated choice. She knew the societal rule, which was the person who initiates the rupture is blamed for the fallout.
Always.
If she filed for divorce, society and potentially her own children would point the finger at her for destroying the family unit.
So what did she do?
She chose to absorb that blame internally. She swallowed her daily reality to protect her children from the social and structural disadvantages of divorce.
She basically used herself as collateral damage. She accepted a completely toxic environment as the price of admission for her kids to have a normal life.
That's exactly it.
And the author points out a devastating paradox that kept women frozen in this choice. They call it the good father, bad husband dynamic.
Oh, this creates an almost insurmountable cognitive dissonance for a mother.
I mean, how does that work?
Well, a man can be cruel, manipulative, and emotionally abusive to his wife behind closed doors, right?
Yeah.
But simultaneously, he can be present, tender, and deeply engaged with his children.
Which is so confusing. How does a mother reconcile that? If your mandate as a mother is to protect your children, how do you tear them away from a father who genuinely loves them, even if he is actively destroying you?
She realizes that her own liberation would directly inflict trauma on the people she is biologically wired to protect.
Her kids.
Right. She can't leave while they are watching and developing. She refuses to be the agent that breaks their hearts.
So she just stays.
She sacrifices her emotional safety to preserve their bond with him. It operates almost like a psychological hostage situation, where the hostages are her own children's happiness.
That is incredibly dark. But let's look at the mechanics of this, too. Even if she reached a breaking point where she felt she had to leave for her own sanity, how does she actually pull it off?
That's the practical side of the trap.
Because we are talking about women who entered the institution of marriage under a completely different set of economic rules.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the systemic issues literally lock the door from the outside.
Right.
We are looking at women whose primary role was defined as domestic. The stark economic reality is that many entered marriage with no independent income, no robust work history, and no assets in their own name.
I really want to pause on the assets part, because I don't think people realize how recently this changed. Women couldn't even get a credit card in their own name without a male co-signer until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974.
1974. It's not ancient history.
No. If you got married in 1972, the entire financial architecture of your life belonged to your husband. The house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, all of it.
Leaving meant stepping out into an absolute economic void. And doing so with children in tow.
And society is notoriously brutal to impoverished single mothers.
Exactly. So staying wasn't a sign of complacency. It was a matter of sheer survival.
So he had no money to leave with.
She had to endure the environment and operate almost covertly.
Like what? What would she do?
Well, perhaps skimming small amounts from the grocery budget over years, or waiting until the kids were in high school to secure part-time employment, just to build a microscopic safety net so she wouldn't end up on the street.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, incredibly dark. Because the source material brings up a reason for staying that is rarely discussed out loud.
Because it deals with raw physical biology.
Exactly. The author calls it the chilling weight.
It is the most unspoken reason, dealing with the fundamental asymmetry of physical strength.
The text reveals that many women are carefully timing their exits based on physical capacity.
Not waiting for the bank account to hit a certain number.
No, not the money. They are waiting years, sometimes decades, for age or illness to reduce the man's physical power.
It's terrifying.
They are literally waiting for him to become too old, too sick, or too frail to pursue them, or to follow through on the violent threats he made when he was in his physical prime.
The strategic endurance that requires is just chilling.
It really is.
I mean, imagine the harrowing reality of your daily life being dictated by a waiting game against biology.
Just watching the clock.
You are sharing a home with your abuser, actively monitoring his physical decline, waiting for his biological clock to wind down enough so that you can safely make a move for freedom without fearing for your life.
It takes the concept of waiting out the clock to a terrifying extreme.
It really does.
And while she is waiting, the human mind searches for a lifeline, right? You have to believe something will get better.
Because enduring that level of tension requires some mechanism of hope.
Exactly. So the text points to this false hope of aging.
Ah, yes. The cultural trope we all know.
Right. She hopes that time will do the heavy lifting for her. The trope is, the grumpy guy who eventually mellows into a harmless, soft old man. She hopes the fire of his anger will just naturally burn out.
But the reality the author highlights is often the exact opposite. Time doesn't necessarily soften a cruel personality. It often calcifies it.
The source is so explicit on this point. Without the distraction of the children, without the daily routines of a bustling household, the men didn't soften.
Stripped of those buffers, they became more bitter.
More bitter, more entitled, more demanding. The mother found herself in an empty house with a highly concentrated, worse version of the man she had barely survived all those years.
She realizes that time didn't heal him at all. The noise of the family just temporarily masked the depths of his cruelty.
So the hope completely shatters. The bunker is empty of the kids. The financial landscape might be slightly more stable now, or, his physical strength has waned.
But there is one final invisible force the author mentions.
What's that?
The expiration of the permission slip.
Oh, right. The societal conditioning.
These women were steeped from birth in a generational conditioning that dictated their behavior. They were handed a very rigid script.
Marriage is forever.
A good wife endures.
Divorce is a moral failure.
Right. And those instructions didn't magically expire the day the youngest child went off to college.
So if that internal conditioning is so deep, why are the floodgates opening now? Why are the stats tripling now?
Well, the conditioning didn't change overnight, but the surrounding ecosystem evolved.
Okay, how so?
The cultural hold of strict religious communities loosened quite a bit. Society at large became way less judgmental about the concept of divorce.
People talk about it openly now.
Exactly. And crucially, these women started seeing their peers do it. Their friends started filing.
Oh, so it's a slow dawn of realization. She looks around and sees that the societal walls of her prison have actually eroded.
It takes years to unlearn that deeply ingrained mandate to stay and to realize a profound fact that had literally never been presented to her as a viable option.
Which is?
That she actually has the power to leave.
The option wasn't previously rejected, it simply wasn't on the menu of her reality.
Exactly.
But when she realizes she can leave, she takes the leap. However, and this is crucial, the source material is brutally honest about the landing.
It is not a fairy tale ending.
This leap does not result in a soft landing in some feminist utopia.
Not at all. The reality of a gray divorce is economically and emotionally fraught.
The article poses a really blunt question. Is this a straightforward win for women? Is this demographic shift an unmitigated triumph?
And the answer is a resounding no.
Because liberation exists in the real world, and the real world requires capital.
The financial bill attached to this liberation is incredibly steep. And the statistics provided in the text are sobering.
Let's look at those numbers because they blew my mind. Women aged 50 and older experience a massive 45% decline in their standard of living following a gray divorce.
45%, almost half.
Meanwhile, men in the exact same demographic experience only a 21% decline. Wait, I need to stop and ask you about the mechanics of this.
Okay, sure.
How does a legal 50-50 split of marital assets result in a near 50% drop in living standards for her and only a 20% drop for him? What is actually happening to the money?
You're touching on the exact mechanism that penalizes traditional domestic roles.
Okay.
A 50-50 split of current liquid assets doesn't account for the capacity to regenerate wealth.
Oh, right, earning power.
We are looking at a woman who likely has a multi-decade gap in her work history because she was managing the home and raising children.
The invisible, unpaid labor.
Exactly. When the marriage dissolves, she doesn't receive back pay for 25 years of being a household manager, a chef, a nurse, and a logistics coordinator.
She just gets half of whatever is left in the bank.
Right. But more importantly, she hasn't been paying into Social Security at the same rate. Her name might not be on the primary pension.
And if she tries to get a job at 60?
She faces severe age and gender discrimination. She's starting from the bottom.
And the husband.
The husband, meanwhile, retains his earning power, his uninterrupted Social Security credits, and his career progression, which, ironically, was made possible by her domestic labor.
Because she was managing his life so he could work.
Exactly.
I love how the author frames this. They write, "It is liberation, but it is liberation with a massive bill attached."
It's a perfect way to put it.
You are literally buying your freedom with your financial security in your old age. You are trading the psychological terror of your marriage for the existential terror of poverty.
It is a brutal trade-off. It exposes how our economic structures deeply penalize women for fulfilling the very caregiving roles that society demands of them should the marriage ever fail.
And the cost goes beyond the bank account, right? We have to look at the familial tremors. Even with adult children, the fracture of a 30-year structure sends shockwaves.
It does. The family is society's smallest unit. When it fractures late in life, it destabilizes the adult children's understanding of their own foundation.
The research cited in the text provides a really heavy statistic on this. Children of divorce, regardless of their age when the parents split, are statistically more likely to experience divorce themselves.
It's a sobering ripple effect.
Now, the text clarifies that many go on to build healthy marriages. It's not like an automatic curse, but the likelihood increases. You cannot dismantle a multi-decade institution without some debris falling on the people standing nearby.
Which brings us to the most critical part of the author's argument.
Right.
Given the severe financial penalties and the undeniable familial trauma, how do we, as a society, as friends, as adult children, support the individuals navigating this?
How do we move past the reflex of moral judgment?
The roadmap the author provides starts with our perception of the woman leaving. We have to see the individual, not the statement.
This is a really vital distinction. When an older woman files for divorce, she is not intentionally performing a feminist political act.
No, she isn't trying to be a symbol for a movement or a talking point in an online generational war.
She is a specific human being who reached a specific limit after a specific accumulation of pain over decades.
She doesn't need to be praised as a radical hero, and she certainly doesn't need to be condemned as a villain destroying family values.
She just needs her reality to be acknowledged. She needs to be seen.
And that acknowledgement must extend to the entire ecosystem of the family, starting with the adult children.
Because the children need help processing a fundamental restructuring of their reality.
They do. They need to grieve the loss of the family unit as they knew it. But they also need a radical paradigm shift in how they view their mother.
They need to understand that a mother prioritizing her own mental or physical survival is not a betrayal of the father.
And crucially, after 25 years of constantly prioritizing everyone else's needs, deciding to finally save herself does not make her selfish.
It makes her human.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for the husband? Because the author doesn't just, discard him as the one-dimensional villain of the story.
The nuance of the article truly shines here, because despite his faults, and despite the toxic environment he may have cultivated, the practical realities of an aging man living alone are severe.
He is facing a future he didn't plan for. He operated under the assumption that he had a built-in caretaker for the remainder of his life.
Right.
And he deserves compassion on a strictly human level, completely separate from any moral accounting of his past behavior.
You can absolutely hold him accountable for the destruction of his marriage while simultaneously acknowledging that an 80-year-old man who doesn't know how to navigate his own medical care needs practical assistance.
It is about separating the moral verdict of the marriage from the practical reality of aging.
And it's worth noting that for some couples, reaching this absolute crisis point isn't always the termination of the relationship.
Oh, really? Can it be saved at that point?
The shock of the impending divorce can sometimes act as a catalyst for a conversation that should have happened 20 years ago.
A wake-up call.
If both parties are genuinely willing to do the excruciating psychological work, counseling has actually saved couples at this stage. It forces an honesty about who they have actually become, rather than the roles they assumed decades ago.
However, the text is pretty realistic about this. Often, by the time the paperwork is filed, the woman has been emotionally divorced for a decade.
Usually.
If the decision is final, the mandate for the community is clear. Offer practical support, not a moral verdict.
Help her figure out how to navigate a 45% drop in her standard of living. Help him figure out how to organize his life.
Drop the judgment about who was right and who was wrong.
The author closes the article with a piece of advice that is so simple, yet so profoundly powerful.
What's that?
She says this woman has been waiting a long, long time to be asked how she is doing, Just start there.
Wow. A profoundly simple question that should have been asked 20 years prior, finally being asked in the present.
It's a great place to start.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground on this deep dive. We started with the startling data of the Great Divorce Revolution rates tripling for the over 65 demographic.
We unpacked the complex psychology of why they stayed, from absorbing societal stigma to the terrifying reality of waiting out an abuser's physical biology.
And we examined the unromantic, harsh economic realities of late-in-life liberation.
Well, we really tried to move past the surface-level judgments to understand the empathy deficit, the shifting power dynamics within the home, and the urgent need to transition from societal criticism to practical human support for families undergoing this seismic shift.
I want you, listening right now, to consider how you view the older women in your own life.
Your mothers, your aunts, your older colleagues.
Think about the invisible burdens they may have carried for decades under the culturally accepted guise of duty. Are we judging them for the boundaries they are finally setting today, or are we asking them how they managed to survive the storm we never bothered to notice?
This raises an important question, something that builds on the data we discussed, but pushes it a step further into the future.
Okay, what are you thinking?
We talked about the sources finding that adult children of divorce are statistically more likely to experience divorce themselves. We framed it as a negative tremor, a familial trauma. But let's view it through a different lens for a second. If these adult children are now watching their mothers, often for the very first time in their lives, choose their own well-being over quiet suffering.
If they are watching them refuse to endure a toxic environment a moment longer.
Right. Could this trauma actually be a hidden blessing?
Oh, that is a fascinating shift in perspective.
Could witnessing the Great Divorce Revolution actually rewrite the generational script? Could seeing their mother finally blow up the bunker teach the next generation to never accept a marriage built on silent endurance in the first place?
So it's not a negative statistic.
Perhaps the statistical increase in their own divorces isn't a failure of commitment, but a refusal to repeat the cycle of their parents' hidden misery.
They aren't failing at marriage more often. They are just refusing to tolerate the unbearable conditions their mothers were conditioned to endure. They are learning to evacuate the bunker before the storm consumes their entire life. That is a truly provocative thought to leave you with today. Keep digging into the sources around you. Keep asking those missing questions. And remember, just because the sun is shining outside doesn't mean the storm is over for the person trapped inside. We will see you on the next deep dive.